It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, he is Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Here we are into November. Well, it was interesting taking my nap before I came in. My head is all over the place.
Well, it's weird because my wife and I were running errands, and we stopped to eat yesterday afternoon. And I don't know, it was around 3 o'clock, but now the sun sets like at 5:35 after the time change. And so at 3 o'clock, the afternoon is, the sun's already making its way down, starting to make its way down. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get used to this very quickly. I've really been enjoying the summer. I've just been enjoying. We haven't had, this massive heat wave, or typical Texas summer. We had not as many 100+ days this year. So, but we did get some cooler weather recently, and for our friends up north, it's all relative. We're going to see a high of 83 this week. That's nice.
I hope to get out golfing on Friday.
Yeah. All right.
The show. I really do.
Yeah.
I've golfed once this year. That's it.
Yeah.
I've gone to the driving range, but man, I've just had a ton of injuries and stuff. But I think I've the opportunity. I've been waiting for a week like this. I wanted to start October 1st. And of course, more back spasms came up. Well, that's what you deal with as an old man.
Yeah.
But, all right, well, the Supreme Court on Wednesday going to be hearing the case of tariffs. Amy Howe wrote a great preamble to all of this coming up, explaining it. And as she writes, let me just read a couple of sentences here. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, and requires that bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. In issuing the executive orders that imposed the tariffs, Trump relied primarily on a 1977 law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Section 107 of IEEPA provides that the president can use the law, quote, to deal with any unusual or extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the U.S. to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. If he declares a national emergency with respect to such threat, Section 1702 of the Act provides that when there is a national emergency, the president may regulate importation or exportation of property in which any foreign country or national thereof has any interest. The Supreme Court has never weighed in on the president's power to impose tariffs under IEEPA. The United States versus Yoshida International, a 1975 decision by the U.S. Court of Customs and Patent Appeals, is perhaps the most relevant to the current tariff debate because of similarities between the IEEPA and the text of the law. At the center of that case, the Trading with Enemy Act of 1917. The case began as a challenge to then Richard Nixon's 10% temporary tariff on imports in response to a large trade deficit, which in 1971 was a relatively unusual development in U.S. history. In 1974, the U.S. Customs Court, the predecessor to the Court of International Trade, ruled that Nixon did not have the power under the Trading with the Enemy Act, which allowed the president, in the case of an emergency, to regulate the importation of any property in which any foreign country or national thereof has any interest. In response to that customs court, a provision of the Trade Act of 74, specifically gave the power the president to impose tariffs to deal with large and serious United States balance of payments deficits, but at the same time, that law limited tariffs to a maximum of 15% and a duration of 5 months. The Court of Customs and Patent Appeals reversed the decision of the Customs Court, concluding that Nixon had the authority to impose the tariffs after all. The 10% tariff, the court explained, was a limited one imposed as a temporary measure calculated to help meet a particular national emergency, which is quite different from imposing whatever tariff rates he deems desirable. That was at Nixon, by the way. That's what they were looking at.
Right.
Now, the challenges argument here contends that, unlike other laws that directly deal with tariffs, IEEPA does not mention tariffs or duties at all, and that no president before Trump has ever relied on IEEPA to impose tariffs, and the government has not provided an example of any other law they add in which Congress used the phrase regulate or regulate importation to give the executive branch the power to tax. Indeed, a group of small business people led by actually that wine company, VOS Selections, say hundreds of statutes grant the power to regulate, and none has ever been understood to grant taxing powers. If regulate means tax, it would overturn the accepted understanding of these laws. Interpreting IEEPA to give the president the power to impose unilateral worldwide tariffs would create a variety of constitutional problems. The challengers contend. First, they write it would run afoul of the doctrine known as the Major Questions Doctrine, they say, which requires Congress to be explicit when it wants. And this is the whole thing with the coal and the whole thing with the coal decision. What was the other decision? Recently, the coal decision, there was another decision that came down that said it doesn't say that.
Right.
If it doesn't specifically say it, you can't assume that it does in executive orders. And that was actually used
was that the
one was for the coal.
EP, was it another? There was
they
another,
were both one was
waters,
coal. The other one
waters of the U.S.
Or was the other one regulate carbon dioxide?
Yeah.
I know that would have been it because the coal was on carbon dioxide.
Right.
Okay.
So it was the WOTUS and the coal thing, right? I
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Chevron, the Chevron doctrine.
Oh, yeah. The Chevron, duh.
Yeah.
Duh. Yes,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Allowing the president to rely on IEEPA to impose tariffs would also violate the non-delegation doctrine, the principle that Congress says cannot delegate its power to make laws to other branches of the government. In their brief, the states say that although Congress has in limited circumstances specifically given the president the power to adjust tariffs rates, the president in this case reads IEEPA as delegating the entirety of Congress's tariffing authority to the president's essentially judicially unreviewable discretion, which they say is unconstitutional, not what the law is. Trump administration counters the tariffs fall squarely within the text of the IEEPA, Congress's grant of power to the president to regulate importation. U.S. Solicitor General plainly authorizes the president to impose tariffs because tariffs are a traditional and a commonplace way to regulate imports. I can see the court, some of the members agreeing with that.
Yeah.
The Federal Circuit Court was wrong, the Trump administration argues, when it concluded that even if the IEEPA authorizes tariffs, it does not authorize unlimited tariffs like the one at the center of this case. IEEPA and the other federal trade law, the National Emergencies Act, already impose substantial checks on tariffs, including by limiting emergencies to 1 year and through a slew of procedural and reporting requirements. that allows Congress to oversee and override the president's determinations. Nor does the major questions doctrine bar the president from imposing tariffs under IEEPA sour rights. This is going to be interesting because I don't know where the judges are going to land on this. I don't think, because the question really comes here. Congress is the one that's supposed to put tariffs on.
Right.
If you're talking about tariffs long term as a policy of the nation, especially since it is viewed as a tax on the importer that is an American company, at that point, I believe you're going to get most of the judges except Roberts.
Yeah, because he'll call it a penalty.
He'll call it a penalty, whatever.
That goes back to the Obama decision.
That's where I think that if
Obamacare decision,
if they came in and said we will no longer do any trade with you, because this is one of the keys. Number one, what is an emergency? But I don't think the Supreme Court's ever going to deal with that. Because they don't want to
trying to define an emergency.
Trying to define an emergency, because at that point, then you're regulating the executive branch. So I don't think they can do that. I think it will come down to I think one of the things it might come down to. I do not want to try to predict how the Supreme Court will come down on it, but I believe I'm right here by saying if the president said we are banning half the imports from China, he's not taxing an American company by doing that. The actual act of getting the tariff from the importer, which is the American company, that's the problem. And from what I know, they're not making that argument that a tariff is not a tax on an American company. Remember, the president initially said that it was the foreign countries that paid the tariff.
And Besson has said publicly multiple times,
right.
I know at least three times that he has said it is on the importer.
Right. And I don't see that that's part of their legal argument.
Right. And if they tried to make it their legal argument, then it would be, well, wait a minute, hold on. The Treasury Secretary is countering that. So,
and just so everybody knows, this isn't about whether you think tariffs are right or wrong. It's
an authority issue.
It's what's legal and what is constitutional and what the law actually says in a law that has a lot of openings.
Yeah.
For interpretation.
Right.
But I think the thing that differentiates this is the tariff. If you in IEPA where it says regulate the importation or whatever, well, you can regulate it, but if you regulate it to the point, this is an argument I would probably make if I was one of those companies. I don't know whether you write it legally this way, but I'm being taxed. I have to pay the federal treasury this amount for what I bought.
Yeah.
Congress did not approve this tax on me. If the president said 10% or 20% of the imports that we get in China, this is all hypothetical now, just for the legal argument. This you can't import, this you can't import, this you can't import. It doesn't matter if an American company is harmed because they can't get that part. They're still harmed, but they're not being taxed. That's the difference.
Right. Which would be, I'm guessing a problem with people like Rand Paul, which, I haven't heard him say it to the extent that Ron Paul, his dad, said it, but that gets into the managed free trade thing that we've talked about, and where Ron Paul was against all managed free trade. He just wanted open free trade. And so if the government is saying, no, that, you can't import that, you can't import this, or something like that, that's not the same as taxing the importers.
Right. That's the only point. Again, This isn't a justification
exactly.
of whether you're for or against tariffs.
Right.
It's legally what are the questions that they'll be looking at. And since they're looking at the tax part of it, that's part of how, if I'm on that side, I would argue it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing is, and we had talked about this last week, what is an emergency that probably will come up in the debate? I don't believe that the Supreme Court is going to just try to decide what defines an emergency for the executive branch to do something. They just don't do that.
Right.
They don't like to do that because you don't know you cannot define specifically what any emergency is going to be.
Right.
But you can define, will they come out and say, yeah, but these are, for example, when he put the extra tariff on Canada, and we said it last week, whoa, is he putting himself in legal jeopardy? Because the first thing I thought was, whoa, that's not an emergency.
Mm.
He's simply saying, I don't like a commercial they're running. You may think the commercial was wrong, and as the administration calls it propaganda, that's done all the time.
Yep.
President referred to it as election interference, but the fact is, it's not, nobody's being elected at this moment.
Right.
But it was an ad that ran in Ontario during the World Series, basically saying Trump is no Reagan, whatever, and and the back and forth going on.
Right.
But that, I believe, will be brought up as a point.
Yeah. No, it could well. And we'll find out during the hearing, I guess, on Wednesday. It's going to be an interesting hearing.
Yeah. There are so many questions.
Everybody's going to be tuning into that.
866-98-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
After fuel, an owner-operator's second biggest variable cost is tires. To save, get as much life out of them as possible with good habits. Maintain proper inflation. It's free and easy, yet it's the highest saving maintenance you can perform on the truck. Improper inflation is by far the greatest reason tires fail early. Perform routine maintenance. If a technician can, by hand, initiate irregular movements in tie rod ends, kingpins, wheel bearings, and torque rods, that spells trouble. Fight irregular wear by replacing suspension components. On the steer axle, change your shocks at least as often as you change your tires. On the drive axle, replace shocks halfway through the tire's life, and when the tires are changed too. Finally, employ good driving habits. You have full control here. More conservative driving over rough surfaces helps reduce wear. Speeding, hard braking, curbing, and tight turns cause tires to wear fast. On the other hand, steady acceleration, braking, and steering can extend the life, saving a bundle. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section on the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We are Red Eye Radio. Coming up more on the legalities of what the Supreme Court will hear this week coming up on tariffs. And also the very, very sad news out there that on November 15th, MSNBC will start going by MS Now.
Okay. Wow.
We won't spend a lot of time on that.
No, it's too sad to do that. Yeah.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio, from the Uniden America Studios.
He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Well, that's really it on the MSNBC story. They changed to MS Now.
Yeah,
November
we don't
15th.
care. Look, the parent company, or what, former parent company, I guess they're still the parent company. They spin them off to a new division. It's like they sent the children out in the backyard to play, but locked all the doors so they couldn't get back in. I don't know what the spinoff looks like, and ultimately, because I don't know what the business model for that is. You know, you and I have talked about this for cable news altogether. I mean, Fox News seems to be doing all right. Is CNN still on the air?
Not only are they on the air, but they've got their streaming channel where they're charging for it now again.
Oh, that's right. They brought that back, didn't they?
No major personalities. I haven't heard of any.
Well, here's the problem. When they first started that, who they started with? Who was the draw? Chris Wallace. What? No. And just generationally speaking, forget about all the other reasons, just the fact that, if you're talking about streamers, right, somebody getting one of the Plus apps, aside from like Disney Plus and that with parents, and even that is, they're still trying to find their way on that one. But all these other, Plus apps, well, you're looking for the newer generation. You're looking to, and I don't even know if Anderson Cooper gets the job done in terms of attracting streamers, people to stream and pay a premium for that. You know what I mean? I don't know who you bring in. That's
Neither do I. Now I know. Yeah, I saw Anderson Cooper's name mentioned for CBS.
Yes. Because he's already doing the 60 Minutes thing.
Yeah.
And it would make a natural, I guess, transition to...
and show that it's not just going to be conservative.
Right. Look, for me, I want to see that the work is done, but I don't... Here's the thing. I don't know how you get there. Because remember when Walter Cronkite, America's Anchorman, or,
This is Walter
right.
Cronkite.
Yeah, it's like, well, wait a minute. No. Hold on a second. First of all, Rush Limbaugh was America's Anchorman. How dare you? And we miss him dearly. But on the Walter Cronkite thing, back in the day, I mean, because we only had 3 channels. Let's face it. There was not much to choose from. But eventually he ended up saying, well, yeah, we were biased, but we thought we were right. And that's the whole thing. If these activists that are posing as journalists on the left, if they believe they're doing the right thing, that's what draws them into it. I mean, you can kind of hear it in some of them in some of the young journalists when they talk about, well, I got into journalism because I wanted to make a difference.
I wanted to make a change, yeah.
And that's, well, look, again, because there's this, I believe in a free society. I think that true journalism plays a critical role in a free society. That's not how they think, though.
No.
Because you can't, they got into the whole stardom thing. That's another thing that we're seeing going away. Gail on CBS this morning, her paycheck has been dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping. They made celebrities out of these people to the point that they were paying them, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars a year. And, when you talk about journalism, you should be doing really good work. I don't have a problem with people making money. But along with that money came that fame where they became the celebrity. And not because of the work that was being done. And to me, that's kind of bizarre. You're not the rock star. I know why some that are in the opinionated part of that whole cable news thing, become celebrities. That's just kind of the way, that it works, because they're sharing more of themselves in their work. Right? You're
right, but personality
describing.
also sells. We know it does in this business.
Sure. But at the news desk for journalism, for me, it's about the work first. The personality is fine. Like I never had a problem with like Tim Russer.
Yeah, but the morning shows have become YouTube cat videos.
Yeah, right.
I could do that.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Now, people really don't want to see my kitty cat videos.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I want to get back one more comment here on this, the Supreme Court looking at tariffs. Here would be my questions. Number one, I'm reading here where it talks about one Obama appointee, when looking at the tariffs, wrote the dissenting opinion on the U.S. Court of Appeals that put a hold and said Trump can't do it. But a judge that disagreed, Richard Taranto, a Obama appointee, was joined by three other judges. He argued that the language, as confirmed by its history, authorizes tariffs to regulate importation. Okay, so that was – now, we talk about the Chevron decision, the coal decision, the global warming gas decision, where the Supreme Court came out and said, look, if a law is written, it's got to be specific.
Yeah.
If it's not specific, if Congress didn't say it, then it doesn't wash. This is not a Supreme Court that's afraid to look at past precedent and say, that was wrong.
Right.
So the whole history thing may not work, and it may come down to the fact that the Supreme Court, throughout its history, because the Constitution mentions taxes, imposts, and duties, which are tariffs.
Yeah.
Can only be done by Congress. So if you look at it, and because we had chuckled about the whole Obamacare thing where, John Roberts, it's not a tax, it's a penalty. We go, of course it's a tax. Yeah. It's collected by government from you.
Right.
It's a tax.
Well, no, he wrote that it's a tax. It's not a penalty, and they wrote it as a penalty. And his ruling was
all right. They wrote it as a penalty, and he said it was
and he said
in fact,
because
he said it was
they've been taxing for years. They have the authority to tax.
Right, because Congress. I'm sorry, I had it backwards.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
because Congress has the ability to tax. They can do this. They go, but they didn't write it as a tax. They wrote it as a penalty.
Right.
And so you're making that judgment that it's a tax and not a penalty.
Right.
Whatever. And because you didn't do something, that's like, is a traffic ticket a tax? And that was the argument back then. It's like, no, it's actually a penalty.
Right.
With this, the companies are saying you're taxing us. That if you wish to regulate, you can regulate. You can regulate by stating, all right, we're not going to accept your product. For example, and I checked on it, even if the president calls martial law, you would think that in martial law, the president could say, for example, if, boom, another country invades us, you would think under martial law, the president could put out an emergency tax, right? Because Congress might not be able to get together because their work. President can't do it under martial law.
Right.
Cannot tax. So you look at it and you say, could Congress tell the president, because it is a tax and the administration's admitting it's a tax and the Supreme Court believes tariffs are taxes on Americans?
Yeah.
Because that debate's now not being the president's not out there saying And if he's out there saying it, his Treasury Secretary disagrees with him completely because Besson's been over and over again saying, no, American companies pay the tax. And then it became, see, the American companies are paying it, not the consumer. Well, I just read a study about 50 to 70% of it's being paid right now by consumers, and the others being eaten by companies. But that doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
It's a tax on the companies have to pay that amount. Whether they pass it on or not doesn't matter. Do they have to pay that amount that's being charged at the border to the Treasury Department? Yes. That's a tax. Is there any other? Because remember, this is the Supreme Court that will look at past precedent and go, it was wrong.
Yeah.
Does Congress have the ability to give the president, when he believes there's an emergency, to put a sales tax on Americans? To put an income tax on Americans?
Well, the answer is no.
Well, I'm trying to, and as I'm saying it, I'm trying to find a flaw in my argument.
Well, you mean in a real emergency? If there were a national emergency, or
whatever. I don't know what's an emergency.
Right.
Now, I think the Supreme Court might look at it and say, they may say this isn't an emergency and not define what an emergency is. They might say this isn't an emergency because we have had deficits for the last 55 years and Congress has not passed one law to stop it. But if they all agree that a tariff is a tax on an American company, and Congress says, well, if there's an emergency, we're allowing you to put a tariff on companies when there's an emergency. Well, they can't do that for any other tax. Why could they do it for a tariff?
Right.
If the president said, because we're using China as an example, China's involved in unfair trading practices, the deficit's out of control, we are not going to take 20% of your product. Companies may be hurt, but they're not directly taxed by the federal government. That would be the difference.
Right.
And just remind everybody, we're not talking about whether you believe tariffs are right or wrong or where the country is economically speaking. We're simply saying, what does the law say and the Constitution say, and how might the Supreme Court go on it?
And if the Supreme Court knocks it down, what might be the remedy or workaround from the administration? Because it applies to that. If they say,
it might be that, or it might be Congress voting on tariffs, but I don't know where that would go.
I don't think the GOP would want to bring that to a vote. I mean, you would have a number of liberals on tariffs that would love it, but they also don't want to agree with Trump. I mean, remember Bernie during Trump's... Actually, it wasn't during Trump's first term. It was before he became president in 2016. Bernie said, I agree with Mr. Trump on tariffs. They were both running at that time, and that was before Trump became president. But he said, because someone asked him on, I forget where it was, in an interview, do you agree with tariffs?
Did Bernie vote last week?
I don't know.
Did he vote last week on it? We got
to look at that.
I got to look at
on
that.
the resolution.
Yes, I got to look at that. I didn't even look at that.
No, we're going to have to look at Bernie's vote.
Yeah, I know.
That's a great question.
We are Red Eye Radio.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, one of the questions we all ask is when will there be a decision coming down from the Supreme Court on the tariffs? Nobody knows. In SCOTUS blog here from Amy Howe. By the way, SCOTUS blog is a great resource.
Yes.
If you want to get a place that focuses on all the legal aspects, which is really all that matters in a Supreme Court case.
Amy Howe is really great.
She's really, 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 really good. She writes, on one hand, this case is a complicated one, could involve multiple opinions, not only a majority opinion, but also dissents and concurring opinions, all of which could slow down the process. On the other hand, the Trump administration urged the judges to act quickly, telling them the longer a final ruling is delayed, the greater risk of economic disruption, and the court fast-tracked the case on the schedule that the government proposed, which at least suggests they're prepared to act quickly.
Yeah. Wednesday will be very interesting.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.